The Johnsons were the picture of suburban bliss, or so it seemed to everyone else. Ryan Johnson, a 39-year-old financial analyst with a reputation for precision and dependability, lived with his wife, Melissa, in their sprawling colonial home on the outskirts of Denver. They had been married for 12 years, a partnership built on shared dreams, mutual respect, and a promise that they'd never become one of those couples who drifted apart. At least, that's what Ryan believed. Melissa, a former art teacher turned homemaker, had a warmth that Ryan found magnetic. Her bright smile lit up rooms, and her laugh had the kind of authenticity that made strangers feel like old friends. The couple had 2 daughters, Grace and Emma, whose laughter filled their home with joy. It was the kind of life many would envy. But beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic marriage, something sinister had taken root. Ryan's unease began with subtle changes. Melissa's phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now always within arm's reach, face down. The occasional late nights, first rare and excused as book club meetings or errands, became more frequent. Ryan dismissed his growing unease, chalking it up to Melissa wanting time for herself after years of dedicating her life to their family. But doubt, once seated, has a way of growing. One evening, Ryan noticed Melissa laughing softly into her phone while pretending to load the dishwasher. She froze when she noticed him watching, her face breaking into a smile too forced to be genuine. "Just a funny meme from the girls," she said lightly, sliding the phone into her pocket. Ryan nodded, though her explanation didn't sit right with him. He didn't press the issue, but from that moment on, he started paying closer attention. Their anniversary arrived 2 weeks later, a chance, Ryan hoped, to rekindle the spark. He'd planned an intimate dinner at their favorite restaurant, complete with a small box holding the bracelet Melissa had admired months ago. But as the evening unfolded, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling of Melissa's disinterest. She checked her phone frequently, her smile fading each time it buzzed with what she claimed were messages from her sister. "You seem distracted," Ryan ventured, trying to sound casual. Melissa's head snapped up. "Sorry, just family stuff," she said quickly. "Nothing important." The vague response gnawed at Ryan, but he pushed down his doubts. Accusing her without proof felt wrong. After all, wasn't trust the foundation of their marriage? That trust began to crumble 2 nights later when Ryan stumbled upon an innocuous email notification on their shared iPad. The sender, Nate D., was unfamiliar, and the subject line, "Can't stop thinking about you Red Heart," sent a chill through Ryan. Heart pounding, he opened the email. The message was brief but intimate. Nate spoke of a perfect weekend, how he ached for her touch and couldn't wait until their next rendezvous. Attached was a blurry photo of a woman who looked unmistakably like Melissa, laughing as she clinked glasses with a man whose face was obscured. Ryan sat there in stunned silence, a whirlwind of emotions surging through him, disbelief, betrayal, and a burning need for answers. But as hurt as he was, Ryan knew he needed more than an incriminating email if he wanted the truth. He would not confront Melissa, not yet. The following days were a masterclass in deception. Ryan played the role of a loving husband while meticulously documenting Melissa's movements. He noted her late-night errands, the names she casually dropped, and the hours she spent catching up with old friends. Each inconsistency painted a clearer picture of her lies. Ryan turned to a private investigator, Brian Clark, who came highly recommended by a friend. Within days, Brian confirmed Ryan's worst fears. Melissa had been meeting a man at a nearby upscale hotel every Thursday afternoon, Nate Dalton, a tech entrepreneur with a penchant for married women. But the investigator uncovered something even more shocking: Melissa wasn't just having an affair. She was making plans to leave. Ryan learned of her visits to a divorce attorney, the secret bank account she'd opened, and emails outlining her intentions to claim full custody of Grace and Emma. "She's smart," Brian admitted during their final meeting. "But she's underestimating you." Ryan nodded grimly. "She thinks I won't fight back." Armed with irrefutable evidence, Ryan planned his next steps carefully. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for his daughters, for the home he'd built, and for the man he'd refused to let Melissa's betrayal turn him into. On the advice of his lawyer, Ryan installed cameras in key areas of their home and documented everything. Every time Melissa lied, every time she made an excuse, it added another layer to his case. And then came the moment Ryan would never forget, the catalyst for what would become the most explosive showdown of his life. One rainy Tuesday evening, Melissa returned home late, drenched and visibly upset. Ryan watched her closely as she dropped her bag by the door and muttered something about traffic. But when she slipped into the bedroom to change, she didn't realize she'd left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. It buzzed. A new message from Nate: he doesn't suspect a thing. Soon, we'll have everything. Red heart. Ryan stared at the screen, the weight of Melissa's betrayal threatening to crush him. But he inhaled deeply, his resolve hardening. She had underestimated him for the last time. Ryan spent the next few hours in the dim light of his study, the message from Nate still burned into his memory. Each detail of the affair fell into place like pieces of a macabre puzzle. Melissa's phone, now locked and resting where she'd left it, no longer held any mystery. It was a vault of betrayal, and Ryan had already cracked it. The soft rain pattering against the window was a stark contrast to the storm raging within him. The man who had been content to trust, to overlook the signs for the sake of harmony, was gone. In his place stood someone colder, sharper, a man determined to strip away the illusions Melissa had spun and reveal the truth. The night passed in tense silence. When Melissa joined him in bed, Ryan feigned sleep, his body rigid and his mind alight with plans. If she noticed his distance, she said nothing. As her breathing slowed, signaling sleep, Ryan slipped from the bed and returned to the study. It was time to prepare for war. The next morning dawned clear, though Ryan barely noticed. The house felt different, charged with unspoken tension. Melissa moved through the kitchen with the same breezy demeanor she always wore after her so-called errands, but Ryan now saw it for what it was, a mask. "Busy day ahead?" he asked, his voice neutral as he sipped his coffee. Melissa hesitated, caught off guard by his tone. "The usual," she replied, forcing a smile. "Groceries, maybe a stop at the gym." Ryan nodded, his gaze lingering just long enough to unsettle her before he rose and kissed Grace and Emma goodbye. "Have a good day, girls," he said warmly. "And you too, Melissa." If she detected the edge in his voice, she didn't show it. By noon, Ryan was parked outside the hotel Melissa frequented. Brian, the investigator, had provided him with the schedule of her clandestine meetings with Nate, and today's appointment was right on time. Ryan's stomach churned as he watched her car pull into the lot, her silhouette visible through the windshield as she adjusted her hair. Melissa stepped out, dressed in the same casual elegance she used to reserve for their dates. She checked her reflection in the window, then disappeared through the hotel's side entrance. Ryan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, forcing himself to stay calm. The confrontation he had planned needed precision. Confronting her here, in the midst of her deceit, would be too public, too chaotic. He needed her trapped, unable to spin her lies or call for Nate's support. Ryan waited until Melissa had been inside for half an hour before pulling into the lot. He approached the front desk, a calm smile masking his turmoil. "Good afternoon. I'm here to meet my wife, Melissa Johnson." "She's expecting me," he lied, sliding his credit card across the counter. The receptionist hesitated but handed over a keycard. "Room 214, she said. Ryan ascended the elevator with the weight of inevitability pressing on his chest. His mind raced with scenarios, each more volatile than the last, but he forced himself to focus. As the elevator chimed and the doors slid open, Ryan strode down the hallway, his steps deliberate. He stopped in front of room 214. A muffled laugh from inside pierced the air, Melissa's voice unmistakable. Ryan's hand hovered over the doorknob. The moment stretched, a single heartbeat carrying the weight of 12 years of marriage. Then he turned the handle. The door swung open, and time seemed to freeze. Melissa and Nate sat on the edge of the bed, their laughter dying instantly as they turned to face him. Melissa's expression morphed from shock to panic, her face draining of color. Nate, for his part, looked stunned, his confidence replaced by the wide-eyed guilt of a man caught red-handed. "Ryan," Melissa's voice trembled, her attempt to speak faltering as she stumbled to her feet. "Melissa," Ryan said, his voice calm, almost icy. His eyes shifted to Nate. "And you must be Nate." Nate stood, attempting a veneer of composure. "Listen, man, I think." Ryan cut him off with a single step forward. No, you don't think. Clearly. Because if you did, you wouldn't be sitting here in my wife's hotel room. Melissa tried to intervene. Ryan, please, let me explain. Explain. Ryan's voice rose, the calm breaking under the weight of months of betrayal. Explain what, Melissa? That you've been lying to me for over a year. That the woman I trusted has been planning to take my daughters and destroy everything we've built. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. I didn't. Don't lie, Ryan interrupted. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper, the email he had printed that morning. He tossed it onto the bed between them. Nate glanced at it, then back at Ryan, his bravado crumbling. Tell me, Ryan said, his voice dangerously low, what kind of man thinks it's acceptable to ruin a family? To sit in another man's home, eat at his table, and then sneak behind his back with his wife. Nate opened his mouth to speak, but Ryan held up a hand. Save it. I'm not here to listen to excuses. I'm here to make something very clear. He turned to Melissa, his gaze piercing. You will regret this. Not because of what you've done to me, but because of what it will cost you. Melissa's tears spilled over, but Ryan felt nothing, no pity, no sympathy, only the cold satisfaction of knowing the power was now his. This isn't over, he said, his voice steady. Not by a long shot. With that, he turned and walked out, leaving the room shrouded in stunned silence. As Ryan stepped into the elevator, he felt a strange sense of clarity. The confrontation was only the beginning. The real battle, custody, assets, and ensuring Melissa and Nate faced the consequences of their actions, was yet to come. For now, he allowed himself one small victory, they hadn't broken him. If anything, they had awakened something stronger. Ryan drove home in silence, the hum of the car engine the only sound breaking the stillness. The confrontation had gone exactly as he planned, but it didn't bring the satisfaction he expected. Instead, it left a hollow ache, a reminder of the years he'd invested in someone who had been unraveling their life piece by piece behind his back. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he pulled into the driveway. The house loomed before him, a monument to everything they'd built together. But now, it felt like a stage set, an illusion of a life that no longer existed. Inside, the sound of Grace and Emma laughing in the living room greeted him. Their innocence anchored him, reminding him why he couldn't let Melissa's betrayal destroy him. For their sake, he had to remain steady, even as the ground beneath him threatened to crumble. Daddy! Emma, the younger of the two, came running to him, throwing her arms around his legs. Ryan crouched down, scooping her up and holding her close. Hey, sweetheart. What are you girls up to? Grace is teaching me how to draw animals. Emma said proudly. Ryan glanced into the living room where Grace, now 9, was carefully sketching a lion with a crayon. She looked up and gave him a shy smile. Hi, Dad. Hi, my artist, Ryan said, his voice softening. These were the moments he was fighting for, the laughter, the warmth, the untainted love of his children. Melissa's actions had already stolen enough from him. He wouldn't let her take this. Later that evening, after tucking the girls into bed, Ryan sat in the study, his laptop open. The evidence he'd collected over the past weeks, emails, photos, financial transactions, was meticulously organized into folders. Each piece was a weapon, a safeguard against whatever Melissa might try. As he scrolled through the files, his lawyer, Jack Halston, called. Ryan, Jack said, his voice steady but urgent. I reviewed the documents you sent over. This is airtight. Melissa doesn't have a leg to stand on if she tries to fight you in court. Ryan exhaled, relief mingling with the simmering anger still coursing through him. Good. I want to make sure the custody arrangements are ironclad. I won't let her use the kids as leverage. She won't get the chance, Jack assured him. Between the evidence of her affair and the financial inconsistencies you've uncovered, the judge will see through her. But, Ryan, you need to prepare yourself, this could get messy. Melissa doesn't strike me as someone who will go down quietly. Ryan's jaw tightened. Let her try. The next morning, Ryan woke before dawn, a restless energy propelling him forward. He made breakfast for the girls, their chatter over pancakes a welcome distraction from the storm brewing in his mind. Melissa's absence at the table was glaring, her chair as empty as the promises she'd made. By mid-morning, Melissa returned. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes were rimmed red, though she tried to conceal it with makeup. Ryan watched her closely as she set her bag down and walked into the kitchen, her movements tentative. "Morning," she said, her voice strained. Ryan didn't respond, instead placing his coffee mug in the sink. He let the silence stretch, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on the room. "Ryan," Melissa began, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Do we?" Melissa hesitated, the confidence she once wielded so easily now replaced by uncertainty. "I know you're angry, but—" "Angry?" Ryan's voice was calm, measured, but it cut through her words like a blade. "You don't get to dictate how I feel, Melissa. Not after what you've done." Tears welled in her eyes, but Ryan remained unmoved. "I made a mistake," she said finally, her voice breaking. "It was a lapse in judgment, and I hate myself for it. But it didn't mean anything." Ryan's laugh was bitter, sharp. "Don't insult me by pretending this was just a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or leaving the stove on. This was calculated. Repeated. You don't accidentally carry on an affair for over a year." Melissa flinched, but Ryan didn't relent. "Do you even understand what you've done?" he continued. "You didn't just betray me. You jeopardized our family, our daughter's stability, everything we've worked for." "I didn't want to hurt you," Melissa whispered, her voice thick with tears. "And yet you did," Ryan said, his tone cold. "Over and over again." As the conversation ended, Melissa retreated to the bedroom, leaving Ryan alone in the kitchen. He poured himself another cup of coffee, staring out the window at the backyard where the girls played. His resolve hardened. The next move would be his. That evening, Ryan sat in the girls' room, reading Emma her favorite bedtime story. Grace listened quietly from her bed, her eyes fixed on her father as if sensing the tension beneath his calm exterior. "Daddy," Emma said sleepily as he closed the book, "are you and Mommy okay?" Ryan's heart clenched. "We're going through some things, sweetie," he said carefully. "But no matter what, I'll always be here for you and Grace. That will never change." Satisfied, Emma drifted off to sleep, and Ryan gently kissed her forehead. Grace spoke as he tucked her in. "Mom's been crying a lot," she said softly. "Is she sad?" Ryan hesitated. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt other people," he said. "But what's important is that you and Emma know you're loved, no matter what." Grace nodded, her small hand reaching out to squeeze his. Downstairs, Ryan's phone buzzed with a message from Jack. "Got a lead on a property Melissa's been eyeing with Nate. We should talk." Ryan stared at the screen, his mind racing. The nightmare wasn't over, it was only beginning. But as he stood in the quiet of the house, a fierce determination took hold. Melissa had underestimated him. She thought she could dismantle their life, manipulate their future, and walk away unscathed. But Ryan wasn't the man she thought he was. He was stronger. And she was about to find out just how far he was willing to go. Ryan's decision to expose Melissa was no longer about vengeance. It was about reclaiming the life she had tried to dismantle piece by piece. The next step in his plan would require precision and patience, but he was determined to ensure Melissa would never forget the day her lies unraveled before her eyes. 3 days later, Ryan sat in the courtroom, his suit perfectly pressed, his expression stoic. Melissa entered moments later, flanked by her attorney, her face pale but composed. She had insisted during their last heated conversation that she wasn't worried about the divorce proceedings. "You won't be able to prove anything anyway," she had said with a chilling certainty. "And when this is over, I'll take everything away from you." But Ryan had remained silent, allowing her bravado to inflate unchecked. Today, her confidence would be her undoing. As the proceedings began, Ryan's attorney, Jack, rose, his demeanor calm but commanding. "Your Honor," he began, addressing the judge, "what we're about to present isn't just evidence of infidelity. It's a comprehensive account of manipulation, deceit, and fraud." Melissa's attorney, a sharp-tongued woman named Sharon Carter, immediately objected. Your Honor, my client has admitted to a single lapse in judgment. This case should focus solely on the division of assets, not character assassination. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, raised an eyebrow. I'll allow the evidence if it's relevant to the custody and financial arrangements being disputed. Jack nodded and began methodically presenting the evidence Ryan had gathered. First, the photographs, Melissa and Nate together at hotels, restaurants, and in compromising embraces. Then came the emails, their explicit language eliciting gasps from the gallery. Melissa's face turned ghostly pale as the contents of her private life were laid bare. She whispered furiously to Sharon, who tried to maintain her composure but was clearly struggling. But the real bombshell came when Jack presented financial records showing transfers from their joint account to a private account Melissa had opened in secret. Your Honor, Jack said, his voice steady, these records prove that Mrs. Johnson had been siphoning funds from the family account for over a year. She intended to use this money to establish a new life with her lover, Mr. Nate Dalton, and to fund legal efforts to claim sole custody of their daughters. Melissa's attorney sprang to her feet. Objection, Your Honor. These accusations are inflammatory and speculative. Jack didn't miss a beat. The evidence speaks for itself, Your Honor. We have not only financial statements but also correspondence between Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Dalton discussing the timeline for her departure. Ryan glanced at Melissa, who now looked as though she might collapse. Then came the moment Ryan had been waiting for. Jack called him to the stand, where he calmly recounted the events leading to his discovery of the affair. His voice remained steady as he described the sacrifices he had made for their family and the gradual erosion of trust. But it was the video footage Jack played next that left the courtroom stunned. Ryan had installed cameras in their home weeks earlier, suspecting Melissa might attempt to twist the narrative in her favor. The footage showed Melissa and Nate arguing in the kitchen, their voices low but heated. Do you really think Ryan won't find out? Nate hissed, pacing. You're playing with fire, Melissa. Relax, Melissa snapped. He's too blind to see what's happening. By the time he figures it out, I'll have everything, custody, the house, the accounts. He can rot in that office of his for all I care. The video ended, leaving the courtroom in a charged silence. Melissa's attorney attempted to regain control, but the damage was done. The judge's expression hardened as she addressed Melissa directly. Mrs. Johnson, the judge said, her voice sharp, this video, combined with the financial evidence, paints a deeply troubling picture of your intentions. Custody arrangements will be made with the children's best interests in mind, but it's clear to me that you've abused your position as a parent and a partner. As the proceedings recessed for the day, Ryan stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. His heart was heavy, but there was a sense of vindication. He had exposed Melissa's betrayal in a way that left no room for manipulation or doubt. But he knew this wasn't the end. Melissa wasn't someone who would retreat quietly, and Nate's presence in her life still posed a threat. Ryan resolved to stay vigilant. That night, back at home, Grace and Emma played in the living room, their laughter filling the space with warmth Ryan hadn't felt in weeks. He watched them from the kitchen, silently promising himself that no matter how messy things became, he would shield them from the fallout. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Jack. Nate's been subpoenaed for testimony. This could strengthen our case further. Stay prepared. Ryan set the phone down, his gaze shifting back to his daughters. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he was ready for the fight. Melissa had underestimated him, but now she would face the full consequences of her actions. The courtroom was a battlefield, the air thick with tension as the final day of the proceedings began. Ryan sat at his table, calm and resolute, his lawyer Jack by his side. Across the room, Melissa appeared more fragile than ever, her eyes darting nervously between Ryan and the door where Nate was expected to appear. When Nate entered, the gallery stirred. He was tall, polished, and exuded the smug arrogance of a man who believed he could charm his way out of any situation. But today, Nate's charm would meet its match. The judge called the court to order, and Nate was sworn in. As Jack rose to begin his cross-examination, the gallery leaned forward, eager to witness the showdown. Mr. Dalton, Jack began, his voice sharp, you've had a relationship with Mrs. Johnson for how long? Nate shifted in his seat. About a year, he admitted reluctantly. Jack raised an eyebrow. A year. And during that time, were you aware that Mrs. Johnson was married with children? Yes, Nate replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Did you ever discuss plans to build a life together? Nate hesitated, glancing at Melissa, who stared at him with a mixture of desperation and fury. Yes, we discussed it, he said finally. Jack paced the courtroom, his tone growing sharper. And these plans, did they include using funds siphoned from Mr. Johnson's accounts? Melissa's attorney immediately objected, but the judge allowed the question. Nate hesitated, visibly sweating now. I didn't know about the money, he said. Really? Jack shot back, holding up a printed email exchange. Because this suggests otherwise. The courtroom fell silent as Jack read aloud. Nate, the transfer is complete. I've moved what I need from Ryan's accounts. Once the custody hearing is over, we'll be free to start fresh. Nate visibly deflated, his face a mask of shame. I didn't ask her to do that, he muttered. But you benefited from it, Jack countered. You participated in the deceit and conspired to dismantle this family. Nate had no answer. The final nail in the coffin came when Jack introduced a surprise witness, a former employee of Nate's tech firm who testified that Nate had used company funds to pay for Melissa's hotel stays and gifts. Melissa's face was ashen as the judge addressed her directly. Mrs. Johnson, your actions have not only betrayed your family but have shown a calculated disregard for the truth. This court will not reward such behavior. When the gavel fell, the decision was clear: Ryan would retain primary custody of Grace and Emma, the marital assets would be divided in his favor, and Melissa was ordered to repay the stolen funds. But the drama wasn't over. That evening, Ryan returned home with the girls. As they settled in, he allowed himself a rare moment of relief. But as he stood at the window, watching the sun set over the quiet neighborhood, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Mr. Johnson, a woman's voice said. Yes, who's this? My name is Anna Blake. I'm Nate Dalton's ex-fiancée. Ryan stiffened. What do you want? Anna's voice trembled. I thought you should know, Nate has done this before. Manipulated women, destroyed marriages. He's dangerous, Ryan. He doesn't just walk away when he loses. Ryan's grip tightened on the phone. What are you saying? He's angry, Anna said. And he's blaming you for everything. Be careful. The warning stayed with Ryan as he went about his evening. As he tucked the girls into bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that Melissa and Nate weren't finished with their games. His instincts proved correct when, days later, Melissa showed up at the house unannounced. What are you doing here? Ryan demanded, blocking her from entering. I want to see my daughters, she said, her voice trembling. You should have thought about that before you put them in the middle of this mess, Ryan shot back. But Melissa's demeanor wasn't one of defiance, it was fear. Ryan, she said quietly, I need to talk to you. Nate, he's been threatening me. He's furious about the court ruling. He blames me for everything. Ryan hesitated, unsure whether to believe her. Why are you telling me this? Because he said he's coming after you, Melissa whispered, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what he's capable of. That night, Ryan bolstered the home security system and ensured the girls were safe. He knew Nate's type, entitled, arrogant, and desperate when cornered. But Ryan was no longer the man Melissa thought she could control. He was ready. When Nate finally made his move, attempting to confront Ryan late one evening, he was met not with fear but with law enforcement. Ryan had preemptively filed for a restraining order and alerted the police about Nate's escalating threats. Nate was arrested on charges of harassment and misuse of corporate funds. Months later, as life began to settle, Ryan found himself sitting in the backyard watching Grace and Emma play. The chaos Melissa had unleashed was behind him, though the scars remained. He had emerged from the ordeal stronger, more resolute, and more determined than ever to protect his family. Melissa's betrayal had shattered their marriage, but it hadn't destroyed him. As the girls' laughter rang out, Ryan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Melissa would remember the day her lies unraveled for the rest of her life. But Ryan would remember it as the day he reclaimed his.